And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here alongside Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre, and we are brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. I know a lot of times we want to, in the new year, and it's technically still the new year, it's just the 1st of February. Usually around the time we get past the Super Bowl, it's time to kind of stop talking about the new year. It's just the year, okay? But it's still the new year, and a lot of you still want a new you. And maybe that new you is to have a pain-free life. Maybe you're thinking that's just not going to happen for me. You might be right. We get older. You know, some things just break down. Eventually, that 100% death rate comes for us all. But why not spend $20 to see if maybe you're giving up a little too easily and early? And that's with our friends over at Relief Factor. It is the drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, but they got tired of masking pain with drugs. They wanted to go after the inflammation that's usually the cause of your chronic pain, and that something is Relief Factor, and it costs just $20 to see. If you don't see a difference in 3 weeks or less with the 3-week quick start, what do you got to lose? For just $20 over the last several years, 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start. 70% of them saw such great results, they stuck with the product long term. So no guarantee, but a pretty good value bet. When you go to relieffactor.com, get the 3-week quick start today at relieffactor.com. Again, you want to head over to relieffactor.com. All right, coming up on the show today, we thought it might be fun to reunite with one of our scamdemic skeptics, Phil Kerpen, who was on our show several times during the scamdemic, walking through fallacies in the data with us. And now, as we are sitting here, just about an hour ago, RFK Jr. was confirmed out of the committee on a strictly partisan vote. He was confirmed out of the committee, so he now goes to full confirmation in the U.S. Senate. So what a great day to have a conversation about these COVID narratives. Pardon me. And how they have now come full circle, and how we are seeing the Trump administration, from leaving the WHO to several other things that we have seen from a policy perspective, reacting to what happened to them the first go around. So Phil will join us for that in the next segment of the show. And then next hour, there has been a lot of discussion and a lot of speculation about what will be the next thing the spirit of the age tries. What will be the next, you have to listen to us, you have to hand over your freedom, the next scamdemic level global event. And I think a lot of us are thinking that this is just going to be another healthcare thing, right? And so we're on the lookout for every attempt they make, like with bird flu before Christmas. It certainly looked they were trying to gin up some, fantastical speculation and and whip people into a frenzy, and it went absolutely nowhere. I don't believe it'll be another healthcare thing. I don't. I don't think they're going to go right back to the same well and run the exact same plays out of the same playbook. I think it's going to be the same playbook, but I don't think they're going to run the same plays. I think people are too wise to that now. And I think that in the end, there's just too much skepticism in general. I mean, stop and consider. I didn't even know. All I knew about RFK Jr. is he had some funky beliefs about vaccines in early February of 2020. And now he's about to become maybe the most impactful cabinet appointment in recent American history. I considered it an honor to get to spend a day with him. I taped a special with him with our colleague Jason Whitlock a few years ago. I mean, I am just a portrait of the evolution that's happened in many American households. Not as many, frankly, as people like Todd or Nicole Shanahan or an RFK Jr. maybe would like, but way more than there were 4 or 5 years ago. They don't have the numbers of critical mass obedience to run the same script. It does not mean they're not going to try and make another movie. They will. The question becomes then, what is that thing? What is that thing that has all of the features and the fundamentals that the scamdemic presented, that they could then run the same playbook, albeit with a different game plan? I'm going to predict what I think that's going to be next hour. And I'm going to use an interview that just aired on News Nation a couple of weeks ago from a noted DOD whistleblower who recently gave 4.5 hours of testimony to the United States Senate. 4.5 hours. Now, on purpose, Todd, I've had you not watch this interview because I want you to, on behalf of the audience, I've got 7 clips we're going to walk through next hour. I want you to react to these clips as a proxy for the audience, just a visceral, real-time reaction, okay? And I'm going to lay out for you what you're going to see presented has all of the hallmarks of what happened during the scamdemic, all of them. I'll lay that out for you next hour. Something wicked this way comes. But before we get to that, here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away brought to you by the sights and sounds of hurting your enemies. Since Donald Trump took over a couple of weeks ago, there have probably been no fewer than a dozen executive orders that at any point in the last decade, I think would have triggered outbursts from various Democrat factions, both in D.C. and around the rest of the country. But so far, that really hasn't materialized until yesterday. That is, after Elon Musk and Doge announced they're planning on shuttering the United States Agency for International Development. Boy, howdy. By the Democrats' reaction, you'd think the Trump administration had issued death warrants for their grandmas. Here's squad member Ilhan Omar.
It is really, really a sad day in America. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis.
Congressman Jamie Raskin.
Elon Musk, you didn't create USAID. The United States Congress did for the American people.
Over in the Senate, Chuck Schumer.
If Doge attacks USAID today, then you can be sure they'll move on to another target tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Postal Service or the IRS or even the Social Security Administration. They could be next. Or maybe our national security agencies.
So what does USAID do that has all these Democrats worked up in a lather? Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
$1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap. And I know
apparently the USAID is to the rest of the Democrat Party what Ukraine was to the Biden family. Moving on, Donald Trump had a call with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Castro yesterday. Here's how that went.
Listen, mister, I'm getting awful tired of your... I'm getting tired of your gas. Now jerk that pistol and go to work. You gonna do something or just stand there and bleed?
Canada is indeed capitulating to the Trump threat of tariffs, just like Mexico did, agreeing to deploy 10,000 troops along their southern border, implementing new technologies to secure their border, and appointing a fentanyl czar to ensure that dangerous narcotic doesn't get through their border into the United States. In Los Angeles, protesters waving the flag of Mexico, ostensibly the country they illegally immigrated from, burned flags of the United States, the country they ostensibly want to remain in, all while blocking traffic on busy freeways, because if that's not one of the most sound, logical, and not at all emotionally chaotic arguments in favor of unfettered open borders, I'm not sure what is. In Dallas, give us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses yearning to hurl death threats and slurs at Blaze TV's Sarah Gonzalez, who showed up at one of these illegal immigration marches over the weekend.
Someone just run her over. Let's go.
I'm sorry, what?
No, hey.
Instead of run her over.
Hey.
Run me over.
A lovely people, one and all. El Salvador President Nayib Bukele says after his meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, his country will take convicted felons off the United States' hands for a small fee and house them in El Salvador's now famously effective maximum security prison system. This comes after an executive order last week from the Trump administration opening up a 30,000-bed detainment facility for violent illegal aliens at Guantanamo Bay. A couple of odds and ends. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth visited the southern border yesterday.
To the cartels, all options are on the table.
According to Axios, about 20,000 federal workers have taken Trump's buyout offer thus far. RFK Jr.'s confirmation made it out of committee this morning, 14-13. Squishy GOP Senator Susan Collins says she's a yes on Tulsi Gabbard for D&I. And finally, this aired on the Canadian Broadcasting Company not that long ago. It's some pretty interesting foreshadowing.
Mr. President, I must admit I was worried that you were going to try to humiliate me.
I would never embarrass you, Justin. Are you kidding me?
Thank you, Donald.
Now I want to see you eat it.
Excuse me? The hamburger.
The Big Mac, the president of all burgers. I'm going to make you eat it like a dog with no hands.
Mr. President, I have self-respect.
Not so much, to be honest. I mean, he came like a dog, didn't he? He really did.
Mon ami, I come to you not on bended knee, but as an equal.
30% tariff.
My father taught me to
50% tariff.
Okay, we Canadians are a hearty lot.
60% tariff.
For Canada! I'm a hungry little puppy. I'm so hungry for my puppy chow.
All right, that's enough, Justin. I won't impose a tariff.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Wow. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Sweetheart Winery. Valentine's Day, fellas, is just around the corner, and finding the perfect gift isn't always easy, but how about something different this year from Sweetheart Winery in Loveland, Colorado, also known as the Sweetheart City, where the tradition of mailing Valentine's Day cards was first made world famous. The winemakers at Sweetheart have put together a bold California Cabernet Sauvignon, an elegant Pinot Noir from the Santa Cruz Mountains. That's the one I tried, and holy buckets, it was very good. All right, so they also include, each of these wines come with a love note crafted with care by one of their wine ambassadors on a beautiful card. And when we say it's a beautiful card, it is. The owners at Sweetheart Winery used to own a very profitable wedding business, so they take that romantic presentation stuff pretty seriously, and you'll score with this as a Valentine's Day gift here this year. You'll definitely impress the person you're buying it for, and they'll probably share some of this awesome wine with you too. All right. So go to sweetheartwinery.com/love. Use the code DACE for 15% off your order at sweetheartwinery.com/love. Code DACE for 15% off. sweetheartwinery.com/love. Code DACE to get 15% off. All right. Let's discuss Aaron's montage. And I want to. It is truly something to see what we watched play out the last few years in a couple of states that had governors who did not. I would say Brian Kemp had moments. Like, he was the first Republican governor to push back on Disney and corporate interests trying to lobby his state to abandon culture war issues. Remember, Disney first stepped to Georgia on the heartbeat bill that he signed into law. And Brian Kemp told him to take a flying leap, and Disney threatened to leave. They never did. And they still, shoot most of their productions there in the state of Georgia. But he's had some dips along the way too. He's had some successes, some dips. Brian Kemp, I would say, has had moments of alpha red leadership. Is that fair? But I don't know if you are a Democrat in Georgia. Do you guys get up in the morning with your head on a swivel thinking that you're under comprehensive attack with Brian Kemp as governor? Do you feel that way? Probably. No, there's probably moments he makes you feel that way, but on a daily basis, you don't get up every day with your head on a swivel thinking, where's it coming from today, right? Okay. If you're a Democrat in Iowa or Florida for the last few years, you have been getting up that way. You've been getting up in the morning thinking like, do not ask for whom the bell tolls. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, when does my number come up? All right. Okay. At the Bedford Falls draft lottery. Okay. And what you're seeing right now on a national basis is what it has been like. What the heck is that flying on my desk there? What it has been like if you live in Iowa or Florida as a conservative. We've even got bugs in January in here. How many days? Or February? When do we get out of here, you guys? We're marking the days. We got to get out of here. Okay.
Stay on target.
All right, where was I? I completely forgot where I was at. All right. What a freaking rat trap this place is. Literally, we got freaking rat traps across the studio here. Okay. Where was I? Speaking of rats.
Wherever it was, we're not going back.
Speaking of rats. All right. Most Republicans are in that category. Now, our situation in Iowa is different than what happened in Florida, where we did push things on the ground quite a bit to the right before the Republican governor came along. And we were worried about her as Iowa Republicans for the same reason Florida, or just as, for different reasons than Florida Republicans are worried about DeSantis. Because she came out of the establishment family tree, our worry was that she was going to stymie what we had done on the ground here and push back in the other direction. And we were all wrong. And it's the most wrong about a politician I've ever been in my career, and I could not be happier. right? She has absolutely and taken the ball and driven it and matriculated it down the field, Hank Schramm, to the right. No question about it. Even to the point of getting active in primaries and taking out spineless, feckless, quisling Republicans that are incumbent Republicans even in primaries.
Yeah.
Okay. In Florida, they had the same worry from an opposite direction. The worry was, well, is this guy going to come in here and make us do all the stuff that we said for years we were going to do, but never really were going to do and never wanted to do, right? What you're watching play out nationally with Trump right now, Florida, if you want to know everything that's going to happen and how this is going to be responded to by both Democrats and Republicans, just watch closely what occurred in Florida for the last 5 years. We're nationally now on that cycle. Now, I think, you do not have leverage over a Congress from 50 states that a governor has to push a legislature from his own state, right? You have way more population sectors of the country that are just too balkanized and cannot be won over, right? So it's not like, some 20-point popular vote election win is coming like a governor can win. So we have to prorate this with the built-in limitations of trying to do this nationally compared to even in the largest swing state in the country. It's still, the challenge is way greater on scale. Fair?
No,
okay,
for sure.
But the fundamentals of the paradigm are the same. And so we talked a lot about watching in the last week or so, watching Republicans having to swallow crap sandwiches. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a big time activist in the state of Michigan. In fact, let me share a text that he sent me here a little bit ago. Someone told me that Senator Cassidy, who had been a noted skeptic about RFK Jr.'s confirmation, not one of those Republicrats that knows how to talk Republican in the red state, but is just a complete and total rhino once he gets in and governs as a Democrat. There's a lot of those. Someone told me that Cassidy thanked J.D. Vance for his honest counsel leading to his support of RFK Jr.'s nomination today. His counsel, I'm told, was vote for Trump's nominees or we'll crush you in the next Senate primary. Cemetery. Freudian slip. Or we'll crush you in the next Senate primary. Good counsel. Yeah, pretty much.
Cemetery? I'll allow it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we are going to make these Republicans, the Republican Party is not fundamentally changed. Politics has fundamentally changed a lot now. A lot. I said during Trump's first term that the fundamentals of politics were the same, but the frosting was zanier. That's not true here in the first few weeks. You're watching paradigms are getting uprooted and disrupted right before our eyes, and it is a marvelous sight. And so a lot of people, Bill Cassidy does not want RFK Jr. to be the head of HHS. I can promise you this. And I would guess if we put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around many of the Republicans in the Senate, what are there, 53 of them or 50? I think 53. My guess is maybe 20 of them tops. And I'm probably being kind. Would be affirmatively for it. Is this someone you would have recommended? Actually, no. If I frame the question, would you have recommended that Donald Trump consider RFK Jr. for head of HHS? The number might be 10. Tops. Then another 10 who was like, I don't want to take the political hit for it, even though I think I'll end up voting for it if Trump's going to do it. So I'm for it, but it's too risky. Maybe they wouldn't have thought it was a good political investment. And that leaves you with half the Senate caucus who just, at minimum, who are going to be like, hell no. And they're going to be forced to eat a crap sandwich here. And the same is true of Tulsi Gabbard and several of these nominations and several of these things going on right now that they don't want to do. It is fantastical watching our Senator Joni Ernst awaken from a decades-long slumber. In most days, we forgot she was an elected senator from Iowa. We had no idea what the Sam Hill she's been doing up there for 10 years on a daily basis. No clue. Just absolutely no clue. And the only time we saw her, she comes back for a motorcycle ride once a year. All right, she's like Tom Harkin, who was a senator here for 30 years, but he was never here except for a mailbox in Indianola. She comes back here for a motorcycle ride once every June. Other than that, we don't see hide nor hair of this woman except when for 10 years when she stood like second or third row back behind Glitch at some press gaggle in the halls of the United States Senate. Most days we just didn't even know she existed. Now suddenly she's showing up on Spaces with Elon and USAID. It's not USAID, by the way. USAID came after me for exposing. I mean, I'm like, what has happened to you? Here's what's happened. You happened. And a lot of Republicans are going to eat crap sandwiches until they don't have to. So our job is going to be to make them keep having to. And the Trump administration's job is going to be to, for the most part, and it's way harder. Listen, what DeSantis and his team did in Florida is incredible. Emulating that nationally, even harder. Okay, but so give him more faith. It's a little bit like if a guy hit 400 in the minors, I'm hoping he can hit 320, 330 in the majors. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. If a guy could hit, 40 home runs in the minors, I'm thinking it'd be great if he was an annual 30 home run a year guy in the majors. Fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So give them more grace because the margin for error is greater. But they are going to have to message this, like what you saw from Caroline Levin in her own way, going full Christina Pushaw there on the media. They're going to have to roll this out with ruthless efficiency. And I did an interview yesterday with Convention of States. And I didn't even mean to do this. Just they asked me to describe the first few weeks of the Trump presidency. And one of the phrases I just came off my tongue, ruthless efficiency. And I thought, wait a minute, that's how I described what went on in Florida for the last few years. So that's going to have a lot to do for how long Republicans are going to keep going along with this, which brings us to the Democrats. What you're seeing now, I mean, they have been reduced to Chuck Schumer holding up cans of beer he would never drink. Defending what, for most Americans, is a largely obscure government NGO. Well, Steve, if it's a non-government, no, I said it exactly the way I meant to say it. Yes. Something that most people did not even know existed. And they're finding out that it exists by the itemization of the amount of grift and corruption that it was responsible for, including mostly to some of the worst nations on planet Earth. And they're left to defend this like it's, some last... There's no constituency for this among voters. There is among their interests of their party, but there is no critical mass of... This isn't the White House banking scandal that helped lead to the Republican takeover of the Congress in the 90s. This isn't even as good of... This isn't nowhere near as good of a narrative as Russian collusion, okay? Like, Rachel Maddow couldn't possibly do 6 months of programming, let alone 3 years on. Guys, they canceled the check to Singapore and USAID. It's not a lasting political message, but this is what they've been reduced to. And you've seen this in Florida, and you've seen this in Iowa. And you're starting to see this nationally. The comment Elizabeth Warren made this morning in opposing RFK Jr.'s nomination. Well, vaccine manufacturers, their profit margins are already so low because nothing says I'm a liberal who... defends the downtrodden and oppressed quite like trillion-dollar company profit margins aren't high enough. You are watching Shibboleths of the damned just get eviscerated in public. You are watching a political party be utterly humiliated. This goes even beyond anything we saw in the 80s because this is a far different Democratic Party than we had in the 80s. And maybe if it weren't for the Clintons, we would have seen this Democratic Party sooner. But this is the post-Obama cultural Marxist true believer Democratic Party. And just as we said about Florida Republicans, if in Florida, where they've had unprecedented political success, they cannot still be convinced in the natural to just read the room, bruh, even if you don't believe it, and just jump on the surfboard and take yes for an answer and cash the check, right? And Florida Republicans clearly don't want to do that en masse. That same analysis we gave last week about the Republican Party, it works here on the Democratic side. Same thing applies. I mean, whether it's a Democratic congresswoman claiming on CNN, white supremacists commit 80% of the violent crime in America, just easily fact-checked and untrue. Easily fact-checked and untrue. The video Aaron had yesterday where the DNC chair candidates all raised their hand. The only reason they lost was systemic racism and white privilege. Even in a moment where they could lie to us right now and then just go back and do the Marxist, no. And they're never going to do it. Why? Because they're not just trying to win elections over there. They're trying to win arguments of history. They are trying to fundamentally alter and end our way of lives. And they're not going to change. And nothing will change them. They will have to be defeated. And the core of their ideology will have to be so humiliated in the arena of ideas that no one would dare return to them even if they wanted to, because they could not possibly go any more mainstream than like if someone wanted to run on segregation in 2025. It just cannot, it's just not possible. That's what's at stake here. They have nothing. The deal is we're going to end your way of life and make the cost of living way higher than it's ever been. And you're like, and then they just stop. That's the end of the presentation. That's it. So there's a lot riding on this moment, Todd, right now.
What's amazing is they always had nothing. And one of the most exhausting things for your entire career, Steve, was just that the Republicans ultimately would campaign on doing something about it, but then never would for quote unquote reasons, toxic empathy, who was paying them. Watching this, Steve, one of the most real-time moments in all of American television news history. Then this is what I feel like watching all of this. Remember One Small Step for Man, and it cuts to Walter Cronkite, America's newsman. And I remember he takes off his glasses, and there's just back then the news was, this is the news, and and he broke character. And you could just see a smiling man engaging as an American. Can you believe it? We're on the moon. I honestly feel like that watching it because we are doing something. The works. It's happening. To see people step up. Again, Steve, you're absolutely right. Whatever their motivations are, but action is actually happening. There's doing things. And when you do things, all of their fakeness comes to light. And it becomes more addictive to step on the gas. For RFK to happen, again, the magical power vaccines, you know what I believe about them? This 14-13 vote is a near political miracle. Unbelievable what I'm seeing with my own eyes.
It's funny you summed up this conversation the same way, because I had kind of the same as I was going through the montage this morning and trying to gather things. And really, especially yesterday, having kind of had my head beneath the surface, being out for a couple days last week and trying to reorient myself into what's going on. Somebody sent a meme last night of this cat just going crazy on a keyboard and saying that's a Deace producer, that's Aaron, trying to put together the montage every day. And that's absolutely accurate, because I am trying to keep my head above water, and I love it. It feels like we're alive again. This country has life again. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Good men can do good things. And that's kind of the message of the last 2 weeks. You don't have to accept losers for your leaders.
Amen. More in a moment. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. Now is the time when we have the kind of momentum that Aaron was just talking about before the break. Now is the time to build that parallel economy and to rally around companies that have been on the cutting edge of doing exactly that, like our friends over at Patriot Mobile. And it's also because they have a great product. You can get the same signal service from the big anti-American companies that hate you, but not give them your money directly any longer. And you'll get a customer service team that you can actually understand. It's fully U.S.-based customer service team. If you want to make the switch today, you can keep your number, you can switch your number, upgrade your phone, keep the phone you have. They'll customize with numerous different plans and options as best they can for you and your family. And then at any time, they've got multiple networks within their main hub. So anytime you think you want to switch networks, maybe you've moved to a different part of the country where one network is stronger than another, they'll help you do that too. And all of that for free once you make the switch and join Patriot Mobile. Speaking of free, you can get started today with a free month of service. Get started with a free month of service today with the promo code Steve when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. That's promo code Steve, a free month of service at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Promo code Steve. Make the switch today. Get a free month of service to get you started at patriotmobile.com/Steve. No on Phil?
I think he just joined. Phil, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Sorry. Of course, when I'm running late is when Skype says it has to update and all of it, so I apologize.
That's all right. It is good to see our friend Phil Kerpen again. You can follow him on X at Kerpen, Kerpen, at Kerpen. A lot of good content there. And Phil, of course, was on with us frequently during the winter and spring of our discontent. And the several winters and springs of our discontentment, known as COVID and the pandemic or scamdemic, if you prefer. I thought it would be interesting, Phil, to kind of bring it back. And now we have a new administration. RFK Jr. just got approved out of committee today on a partisan vote. We are seeing people like Jay Bhattacharya, who was essentially shunned at Stanford University for pushing back on this. He's going to take over for Francis Collins. We are seeing people like Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins, who's one of the more respected public health people that took a risk in pushing back on lockdowns and things of that nature. And I think he's about to take over. I think it's at FDA, right, is where he's going to take over. So we have new policy people coming in. And now as you have now with the benefit of hindsight, do you think that it seems that Trump has learned valuable lessons from what happened the first time around with this?
Well, I mean, Trump never admits that he's wrong about anything. But if you look at the personnel that he's put in, it's a 180-degree reversal from where he was when he sort of outsourced everything to Fauci and Birx and let them run wild. And I'm very optimistic about this health team and also some of the early actions. Remember, he's now reinstating all of the military people who were dismissed with full back pay because of the vaccine mandate. And you named the team that he's got coming in, which I think is going to, not only give us a lot of answers about the things we still don't know because of all the stonewalling and all the documents that have been redacted and all of that. So I think we get a lot more accountability, particularly about the origin question and the related cover-up and EcoHealth Alliance and all of that. But I also think that going forward, we're going to have much more sensible policies in terms of public health and the less of the coercive policies that we saw during the lockdowns and all of that. And the other name that you didn't mention in your summary there is Dr. Dave Weldon, former congressman from Florida, who's been nominated to be the CDC director. And he's actually going to be the first ever confirmed CDC director because they only made this a Senate confirmed position last year. That's a really interesting one to me because he wasn't active when you and I were fighting all these fights. He was sort of back in private practice, just being like a family doctor in Florida. He'd left Congress. He was not in the public policy arena. But he is a longtime ally of RFK, who's been very active in some of the vaccine safety debates, was very involved in getting the mercury taken out of vaccines. And so he's not a groupthink establishment type guy. And I think we're going to have an opportunity maybe maybe to try to wrangle that bureaucracy down in Atlanta also. So I'm pretty optimistic we're going to get some major positive changes in the health bureaucracies. And Dr. Bhattacharya is the number one reason that I'm optimistic, because I can't think of anybody better to reorient the NIH and to bring accountability and to restore sound science there. I was amazed throughout the COVID wars at his ability to just get viciously personally attacked and smeared constantly, but remain of good cheer and of remain charitable towards his opponents in a way that I never could. And so I just think he's got the absolute perfect temperament to go through the confirmation process and to actually bring some rationality to that bureaucracy.
That is well said and right on the money about Jay. And this probably won't surprise you. Within our audience, there's probably our audience in particular, given the role that our show played during that period of time, has a unique sector of our audience that has lingering skepticisms to doubts to unrequited vents over the way Trump handled that era, or probably more likely or more aptly described, got handled during that era. Okay. And so we've had this kind of ongoing dialogue and discussion within our own ecosystem here on the show is, when it's I wanted the Republican presidential primary to essentially be a vetting of what happened, given the contrast between Florida and the rest of the country. And that never really quite developed. Once the legal persecutions of Trump began, that essentially became that reset the entire, primary environment that might have existed differently if that had not happened. And so these things have largely, within a sector of our audience, Phil, gone unsatisfied. And I'm of a belief that this is the closest to an "I have sinned against you" from Donald Trump you are ever going to get, are these atoning acts. That's how I would describe them. These atoning acts of appointments that are completely contrary to the voices he listened to 5 years ago, to the policies that he allowed to cripple him 5 years ago. And so as far as I'm concerned, him and I are good. I'm satisfied. The debt that I thought that he owed me as an American has been paid. I can't sit here and say if you lost a loved one that you had to bury, that you never got to see again because of these policies, and you're holding on to the anger for that. I can't blame you for that, but I don't know, what more you could ask from him other than putting a considerable amount of his own political capital at stake in order to get the people that we just talked about into places of real influence and policy crafting.
Yeah, I had to have a Zoom funeral for my mom in 2020 because we were under lockdown. So I'm sort of in the category a little bit of people who are personally affected by Trump's decision to go with kind of the Fauci and Birx over some of his more rational advisors at that time. And, you're right. We're not going to ever get an "I was wrong." But, this is why I was holding my breath a little bit about some of these health policy nominations, because, the Bhattacharya one, for instance, was rumored for weeks before it was actually named. And I was kind of, is this really going to happen? I had a little bit of doubt, and of course it did happen, and he followed through. And I think that, look, Trump was very conflicted in 2020, right? He had people like Larry Kudlow, and later he had Scott Atlas there, and they were saying we can't do this to the kids. We need this society to be open and well functioning. And then he had Birx and Fauci, and he kind of had Redfield, who was kind of oscillating a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he chose the wrong side. There's no question he chose the wrong side. And I know a lot of people are never going to forgive him for that. And I kind of get that. But of course, everything that Biden did when he came in made things worse in every possible way, and more coercive and more destructive. And so, in an election context, he was kind of the choice. But, then we didn't know will we actually get accountability? Will we actually get corrective action? And I think with the team that we have coming in now, we will. And that's probably the best we're going to get from somebody who never admits that he was wrong. And I also think that, a little bit of what went so far off the rails in 2020 was kind of part of this broader problem that Trump never really got control of the federal Leviathan of the executive branch apparatus, that these agencies, he would tell them do this, and then, his political appointee didn't really have control of the agency in many cases. And of course, we saw this in the national security apparatus, and a lot of the early pandemic response was run completely by the national security people. It was actually the National Security Council that hired Deborah Birx. It was not a public health hire. And we certainly saw it as well in things like the CDC. I remember at the school opening forum that I went to in June 2020 at the White House, Robert Redfield said, all the schools need to be open. All the kids are going to be in school. That's the position of the CDC. And I went on the website and it said all the schools should be closed. So he didn't have control of his own agency.
And I think
this time there's a lot of awareness, I think, in the Trump administration. You have to get control of the federal agency.
And I think you're watching that play out right now with what's going. I know you've been covering this a lot too on your socials as well, is the USAID bureaucracy. And I think that is kind of, I mean, this is a drop in the bucket. Okay, I mean, this is kind of like the Clinton Foundation of corruption. Okay, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket of the overall amount of gangster government out there. But just the seal of this alone being ripped off and shown to the American people has been, and I think that it's a demonstration that Trump 2.0 adapted. He learned some lessons. Did not just spend the last 4 years just waiting to go full MacArthur. I have returned, but realize I'm gonna need a battle plan for that actually to happen. And I think that's just one demonstration of a different level of preparedness to do everything you just talked about.
Definitely. And this is actually part of the COVID story, too, because USAID sent substantial grant money to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In fact, I think they sent more than the NIH did. So
they were also a huge advocate of Pfizer as well, by the way. They gave a ton of money to Pfizer as well, USAID did. But anyway, go ahead. Yes. Yeah,
so I think it's a very, very intelligent fight for Musk and Trump to pick, because unlike a domestic agency, there's no constituency in the United States other than far left ideologues for any of the stuff that USAID does, because all the spending is abroad and it's all left wing ideological stuff. And so if this is the turf that we're forcing the Democrats and the media to fight on, it's very, very favorable for us. And they're twisting themselves in knots, of course, because this is an agency that was created by executive order by JFK in 1961. They keep leaning on this law that was passed in 1998 to say, oh, this is a congressional created agency. It's actually a law that Jesse Helms wrote that was trying to get rid of USAID, but it has language in there that says we recognize that it exists, and the president should have the power to get rid of it. And unfortunately, that specific express authorization to get rid of it expired. It was just for however many days during Clinton, and of course, Clinton, who vetoed the bill and later signed it as part of a bigger bill, said, "Oh no, I'm not going to get rid of it. I love it." But this is, I think, it's an incredible window on sort of the insane way that DC operates. That you had an agency that had no congressional authorization for 37 years. It was created by executive order. And then they're saying, well, this law that tried to get rid of it admitted it exists, so now we can't get rid of it. And this is the bizarre sort of head-spinning world that we're in right now.
But how this is twisting them in knots politically, I mean, to see Elizabeth Warren, who fashions herself a champion of the oppressed and downtrodden in America, say she's voting against RFK Jr.'s nomination, and one of the reasons why is vaccine manufacturers already have a low profit margin. To reduce a Massachusetts culture, prosperity, or populist, liberal, quasi-Soviet culture warrior to these $1 trillion biopharmaceutical companies, they need more profit margin. That is just unbelievable to see them stake out that as a talking point in the kind of political ground that they are now forced to defend by this realignment.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the COVID derangement of the left, right? Is, when you decide that the COVID vaccines are the greatest achievement in the history of civilization, suddenly you love the pharmaceutical companies that you spent decades hating. And so they are in this very uncomfortable kind of situation that you definitely saw in those hearings. The other kind of exchange that I found remarkable was when she was trying to get him to say that he would no longer make money from litigation against pharmaceutical companies. And I actually think this is sort of a valid point that she was trying to raise, and the Wall Street Journal has raised this point as well, which is kind of, just like taking money from industry creates a conflict of interest, taking money from trial lawyers can create kind of the opposite conflict of interest. But the idea that Elizabeth Warren, of all people, was saying, how dare you make money from suing the drug companies? I mean, it just makes your head spin. I mean, this is not the ground that Democrats want to be fighting on.
How long do you think, Phil, the Trump administration can keep this going? They have all the momentum right now. They have isolated. They have. I mean, I compared it to the opening few days to a large amphibious political assault like a D-Day. Just hit them on multiple beachheads at the same time. All right, and day by day by day, they're just hammering them on multiple issues comprehensively. They're struggling to get their footing. They're struggling to pick one thing and kind of deconstruct it and rally their base to it. Right? How long can they keep this kind of momentum going?
I mean, I think they've got maybe another 3 or 4 weeks where they can continue to just dominate every day with rolling out new things in the executive branch and deregulatory actions and so forth. But then we're going to kind of shift into the budget season. And, we're probably going to see the president's first budget sometime in March or April. Technically, by law, it's supposed to come in February, but no president ever makes the deadline, so it always comes a little bit later. And then, we're going to have to see how things play out with budget resolutions and reconciliation. How are they going to be able to get a tax bill moving? I mean, all these other things, regulations, to a certain extent, spending, although that's going to come back to Congress later in the year also. But, he cannot do anything on tax without Congress. And they've got to do a tax bill or else everyone gets whacked with $2,000 or $3,000 of a tax hike at the end of this year when the first term Trump tax cuts expire. And that's really where he's going to be put to the test, I think, is whether he can deliver on tax, which is going to take, near Republican unanimity because the Democrats are all going to vote against it. And that's where things could sort of dissipate into a lot of infighting, especially because you've got some of these New York members that really want to uncap SALT and some of these other dynamics. And so, it's one thing to be able to just drive things forward every day when you're releasing executive orders. Mm-hmm. When you have to legislate is when it becomes a lot harder. But, look, a lot of us kind of thought he was going to run into some trouble on nominations also. And it looks like as of right now, everyone except Matt Gaetz is going to get confirmed. So maybe he'll be able to move legislation also. Maybe he'll be able to keep the winning streak going. But I think that when it shifts from kind of executive branch focus to actually doing legislating is where the sledding is going to get a lot tougher.
Great stuff as always, Phil. Follow his work on X at Kerpen. Kerpen is how that's spelled. Kerpen. Phil, it's good to see you again, brother. Thank you for joining us. All right, take care.
All right, Steve, have a good one.
You bet. All right, guys, what do you think?
Wow. Not that I didn't think it before, but that dude's crazy smart. And reminding everybody, you had reason to be skeptical about Trump, to not necessarily hope for what we're seeing right here. But now that we're getting it, and Steve and all three of us here have tried to talk to people who just need to be anti-Trump cult every day, take the win, all right? You don't have to belong to any cult, but take the wins when they come, and they are coming. And there's another voice that just said, this is way more than I bargained for.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life, and I've been at least having some consciousness towards politics since I was a very young child. But seeing the modern left on its heels constantly, like we've seen over the last 2 weeks, one, it's entertaining, but two, it's really encouraging.
So, what will be the next scamdemic level global event? I'm going to predict what I think that is and lay that out as to why. Next hour, stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can do that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Don't forget to subscribe to our new YouTube channel as well, at Deace Show on YouTube. Again, at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, if you love the podcast, thank you. Please declare your love for us by leaving us a 5-star review on whichever platform you prefer to podcast from. You can also hit subscribe or on iTunes follow. That makes sure you never miss a podcast. And every time we do one of these, it shows up right there in your podcast feed. And thanks to all of you that have done both or one of those things for us. And if you've only done one, please consider doing the other. Thank you. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Lumen. Understanding your body's metabolism is key to reaching your health goals. And Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device. Whoa, not sure what that was. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, or if you're gagging on applesauce like I apparently just did, and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning. You can also do so before and after workouts, before and after meals. Find out, are you burning fat? Are you burning carbs? Lumen will also give you, based on your metabolic measurements, a personalized health plan just for you. So your metabolism is your body's energy. It's how you turn your body, or how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps it going. So it's good for you to know everything about your metabolism that you can. And you can do that by taking the next step to improving your health by going to Lumen, 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 lumen.me/Steve, and you get 20% off your Lumen. Lumen.me/Steve. Get 20% off at lumen.me/Steve. And Lumen again, Lumen. So what we're going to talk about this hour, I've been greatly looking forward to this conversation. And this is not an attempt by me to blackpill. As I said on the show yesterday, I have no idea why anybody on the right would be blackpilling right now. Blackpilling, though, doesn't mean you're not blackpilling if you have a disagreement here or there. I don't like the fact that they rigged the DOD releasing the name of who the pilot was of the DC helicopter crash. I didn't like that, and I said that yesterday. Blackpilling means this is not working out. The doom approaches. That's when I want to have this conversation today in the hopes that we don't have to blackpill. And I thought, were there any signs at all that we could have noticed in January or February of 2020 that could have prevented what happened in the rest of that year and the next couple of years thereafter? And to that end, what is it that they might try in the future? Because the spirit of the age is going to try something. I can promise you that. Now, what I don't believe it'll be is another kind of pandemic. I think the game plan will be the same, but the plays called will not be. I think too many people are wise to that. Not as many people maybe as somebody like a Todd Erzin would hope, but we are talking about RFK Jr. just took a massive step towards taking over the top healthcare policy in the most powerful nation that's ever existed on the earth. All right. So maybe we are not at the tipping point that, say, you would prefer us to be at, but we have reached some form of critical mass of resistance to the pre-existent structure that there's too much opposition, in my view, therefore, to go back and just re-rack it and run that same game plan with the exact same play calls. But the game plan, I think, will be the same. Before I tell you what I think this could very well be, and so therefore I want us to be on the lookout for it, let me lay this case out, all right? I think I should, we're going to do a checklist here, Todd, because you have not seen any of the clips of the interview that we're about to show.
Nope.
All right, Aaron has, because he had to get the clips together, but on purpose, I did not want you to see any of this, so you could just react to what I'm laying out and determine, is this idolatry or not, fake news or not, because I'm combining them both for this segment of the show. All right. So here's a checklist I want us to consider, and then at the end of this, we're going to see if the clips I showed you meet the checklist. Okay.
Yep.
For this to be the same game plan, number one, both narratives have the potential to impact every single household. Has the potential to impact how every single person may live their life at a given time. Okay? Both narratives have to create religious-like zeal and conviction. Both narratives can provoke such fear that they cause individuals to lose faith in their own self-reliance and or God and turn to government for deliverance. So far, COVID did all these things, the COVID narrative.
For sure.
Okay. Number four, both narratives, meaning COVID and what I think might be the next game plan, both narratives provide problems seemingly too large for individual or local efforts alone to solve, thus requiring unique power and control granted to national and global governments. COVID did that, right?
Yes.
5, both narratives have enough scientific undertones that can be used to justify both coercive power and communal influence to enforce and segregate the populace. And the scientific undertones are required in order to present some form of objective truth basis. And so therefore you can trust us. COVID did that?
Yes.
Okay. Number 6, both narratives have active pre-existing subcultures largely ignored by the masses or the normies until the tipping point moment, and thus able to produce an instant yet unvetted class of experts whose reputations are not yet tarnished so they can be instantly trusted. COVID did that, right?
Yes.
Did you have a clue who Debbie Birx was? I did not.
No.
Never heard the name. I had no idea that Anthony Fauci had been there since the AIDS epidemic until I heard his name where this is concerned. No clue. We had to vet all of these people, learn all these people. But yet for years leading up to it, there were how many movies or television miniseries or specials about plagues and pandemics and the zombie, fascination. Sure. So you had this subculture of content, that was producing some form of, or maybe you might say tenderizing or softening up the public to accept a narrative that had yet to come, right? And then all of a sudden the narrative arrives and poof, here are these untarnished experts none of us know anything about that we are just to instantly trust. All right. Number 7, finally, both narratives, meaning what COVID did and therefore what I think might be the next one, both narratives have to entice the recipient to mistake science for magic. And to believe the natural world, therefore, is also the hub of the metaphysical. And that's not an unseen realm we are separated from due to our sin. And so therefore, you can now connect with that hub and be considered one of the special people by repeating and doing what the science says. COVID did that, right?
Yes.
So that's a pretty good checklist. You agree with me?
Yeah, it's comprehensive.
All right. So the alternative narrative that we are about to consider has to check all 7 of those things, right?
Okay.
Okay. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about an interview that aired just over a week ago on News Nation. And at last check was over 1 million views. And this is a 2.5 hour long interview. To get 1 million views on 2.5 hours is something else now. And it's a topic we've talked about before that all 3 of us to varying degrees are tired of. But I have never seen it talked about like what was done in this interview. And the clips we're about to show you, I think it is very important for all of you to realize the person that's being interviewed here, this so-called DOD whistleblower, this is not a joke. This guy testified for 4.5 hours in front of the United States Senate. Behind closed doors. Behind closed doors for 4.5 hours to the United States Senate. So we might consider this kooky and fringy. You may. He got 4.5 hours of closed door testimony with the United States Senate to say the stuff you're about to watch. All right. So let's start with clip number 1. There's 7 of these. Watch.
This is, for me, when it became clear. As I get closer to this pig site, I start feeling odd. I start feeling extremely emotional. And the closer I get, the more the emotion starts to overwhelm me. And
what do you feel? What's the emotion?
I feel a sense of my mother. I don't know how else to explain it. I feel this intense hybrid of sadness and happiness and beauty and song. And it was very disruptive to me because I had a very practical responsibility at the time to operate a helicopter in the mountains at night. And I began wondering what was wrong with me. It was late. Am I just stressed? Am I tired? Am I marinating in cortisol and estrogen? I don't know. But as I came over this object for the pick, there was this overwhelming sense of emotion.
What's it saying? the object. Tell me what you're feeling.
Like I said, it was an overwhelming sense of sadness, happiness.
Is it your feeling? Are you suddenly having a mental breakdown on the job?
No, I felt like something connected with me. I felt like something had tuned in to me and my soul and was providing me some sense of guidance on what to do and how profound what I was doing was. And it was so overwhelming that I began to cry. And
I can't imagine crying at nighttime with night vision goggles is the healthiest way to fly a chopper.
No, it is not. And then I'm confused as to why I'm crying at the same time. And then do I abort the mission? So I just did my best to focus on my particular cues when doing this type of work, and I got the load hooked up and I began flying away. And once it was just me and that object in between the pick and the drop site, there's about 20 miles in between, I felt like something was inside of me. I felt like I was possessed by the most beautiful spirit I'd ever been possessed by. And
was it loving?
It was loving. But there was a sense of sadness at the same time. And
had you ever had an experience like this before?
No, it was a very feminine energy, I'll tell you that. It felt like the spirit of God, but not in any masculine sense that I had ever felt. It was like, again, the feeling of my mother and my daughter and beauty. And it wasn't like a soul, it was like a frequency that I was connected with.
Was it scared?
I don't know if it is a thing. I'm still trying to figure out why that happened. I don't want to say that because I have a pretty good idea of what's going on now. And whatever that force was since that night, it has stayed with me. And as crazy as this sounds, it's what's guiding me now. And it's what's providing protection for me.
It's changed your life.
It's changed my life.
Do you think it's made you a better person, that experience?
It has made me a more sensitive and aware person, which I think all of us would be better people.
So that was a moment when you became aware of, at the very least, a technology that had the capacity to touch you remotely.
Remotely.
Telepathically.
Telepathically.
Now, telepathy, we are told, is a nonsense. It's a fiction. So what happened after you flew the object in the sling to presumably the drop-off zone?
Once I made the drop, before I got there, I was really scared that I was going to have to stop flying and punch this thing off because I was so distracted. But then I was like, well, crap, now we've got another recovery site. Now we're going to have to recover this. I'm going to have to emergency land. I don't know. So it took everything I had in me at the time to get to my drop site, and I delivered this. Oddly enough, no one in my crew reported having similar effects from this.
That is the longest clip we're going to see, but I think it's important to get an idea to set up what the rest of this conversation is going to be. This is a veteran DOD contractor claiming he's called in to retrieve, as a helicopter pilot, a UAP or UFO. Describing his experience. What you just saw, he testified on this and more for 4.5 hours to the U.S. Senate behind closed doors back in December. Before this interview. This was said to members of the U.S. Senate. All right, here's clip number 2, Aaron.
What we're dealing with is either non-human intelligence, if we want to use those words, or that phrase, or that acronym. It's either that, or we need to dramatically redefine what we think human intelligence is.
Because this object, whatever it was capable of communicating with you in your mind.
That object, or whatever was controlling that object, was also connecting to me through the mind, through my mind.
Now you learned, didn't you, that this was the tip of an iceberg. It wasn't
Correct.
just you.
Correct.
What did you learn?
Well, my work, coincidentally, shortly after that, led me in support of another particular part of the program, which deals directly with looking at this piece right here, which is there a component on the summoning side that we call, and the operation side of these non-human craft that has to do with consciousness, or at least a field of consciousness that perhaps humans can tap into, and maybe all beings in the universe can tap into.
What is a psionic?
A psionic person is someone with the predisposition for extral, temporal, you could say, abilities and sensitivities. Someone who has a fantastic intuition.
What did you discover the psionics were being used for in the program?
In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, could be communicated with, could be controlled, and could be persuaded to land, all by deploying people with psionic abilities to interface and communicate with the UAP.
And did you see that happen?
Yes, I did.
So there were people who were purportedly psionically gifted who were brought into the program?
Yes, there were.
Where did they come from?
They come from all over. They're not, and all over, I mean, from outside the United States as well as in.
And how are they detected? How are they picked?
I don't really know. You'd have to ask somebody else.
I'm told that there are particular indigenous communities around the world, Native Americans, people in different third world countries, who apparently have enhanced psychic abilities that are recognized.
Sure. I think most people could grasp the idea that perhaps people that are from other cultures, our culture leaves a lot to be desired when we look at the contaminants that exist in our food, contaminants that exist in our drugs, and contaminants in our culture. And some of these contaminants, it turns out, aren't great for your spirituality or your consciousness or your psionic abilities. And so those who live a particular lifestyle or live in a culture where they have a more natural or direct way of life with nature and their surroundings seem to, within those groups of people, there's a little bit higher demographic than there typically is for those with a psionic ability. So these people are sought out and are used to contribute to the research that might be going on with the psionic.
I want to put something to you.
Yeah.
I've spoken myself, you haven't told me this, but I've spoken myself to people of Native American background, Indigenous Americans, who say that this is a particularly popular thing for recruitment from the program to happen in Indigenous American communities.
Yes, I know that for a fact.
There are also people from countries in the third world where these abilities are recognised and not treated with stigma as we do in the Western world.
Yeah, there is no stigma. In fact, if there's any stigma, if you're the one who's not playing along, you might be the outcast in those cultures.
Highlight the word summoned. Notice non-Western Judeo-Christian countries are not among the special ones able to do this. Let's go to clip number 3, Aaron.
Consciousness itself is how you interact and pilot the craft, which is ironic because for the first time ever, the biological creatures inside are not conscious, but the craft is.
The other implication too, from what your experience shows, is that whatever and wherever the intelligence is that's behind those craft, it seems friendly, benevolent.
Benevolent, yeah.
In fact, loving?
Loving. if you want to connect with it, if you want to have a relationship, and if you want to see stuff flying in the sky, you need to be channeling a loving energy. That's
I find
just
that
the way
quite
it works.
beautiful.
Yeah, it is. In fact, there can be individuals in the group that throw off that vibe, that can mess up the vibration of the psionics work and their communication with the beings, and then you aren't as successful.
Have you, in any of the work that you've done, and I know you're being very limited in what incidents you're prepared to talk about, have you ever come across malevolent intelligence that's non-human?
I have not. I personally have not.
Have any of your colleagues?
You'll have to ask them.
Okay. The implications, though, of what you're telling us are incredible. We are not alone.
We are not alone.
There is a non-human intelligence that has been engaging with this planet.
Yes.
To your knowledge, is it just the United States that is having these encounters?
No. No, I can tell you for a fact that my team has been sought after for our unique service that we provide by organizations outside the United States.
But let's to be clear, I don't want to put you in the position of imputing that you might have been helping unfriendly countries. Neither of the countries or none of the countries that you worked with are foreign adversaries.
No, not. And when I say that, I use the word organizations instead of governments because there are many other folks that may be operating in a private capacity that. So let me say this. This situation is not unique to the U.S.
To your knowledge, are Russia and China doing retrievals of non-human craft?
I have no idea. I imagine they are.
Why would you say that?
Well, because this particular activity is not unique to the United States. I know for a fact that members of my team have been asked to provide our expertise and service for organizations outside the U.S., not China and Russia, but the U.S. government does not have a monopoly on the UAP subject matter. I mean, the skies are not classified.
It's global. It's benevolent. And nothing malevolent has been sensed so far by anybody. That brings us to clip number 4, Aaron.
My primary message that I want to get across is that this mass vilifying of what's referred to as the military-industrial complex is a very bad idea. And there are very good people that work over here. Not just good, the best and brightest that America has to offer. And the goods and services that are provided by those organizations which fall under the military-industrial complex are the goods and services that make our country the greatest in the world. And we benefit from those on a daily basis. And so to mass vilify it en masse is not only, that's a crime in itself, but it's a shame. And we're so hungry people are so eager to quantify where their threat is coming from. We want a bad guy. And this is not an entire cabal of bad guys. There are a few bad guys like it everywhere that operate within the military-industrial complex. And unfortunately, their operations get the spotlight.
The military-industrial complex guys, we've had it wrong all this time. They're the good guys. Let's play one more clip, Aaron, before the break. Clip 4.
From your understanding of the kind of people, obviously, who were capable of psionic ability, obviously there's people of Native American background, people from third world countries that are deeply spiritual, that appear to have this capacity to engage with the phenomenon. Was there any other group that was especially susceptible to being able to engage with this technology?
Yeah, kids.
Children.
It's
been suggested to me that left-handed gay men are particularly good at it.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case, that there is a larger distribution of the predisposition amongst children and gay men. For whatever reason, the demographic, when compared to normal society within the program, that gay men and kids and females are more more often seen as having the predisposition for the psionic ability.
So the matriarchal fundamentals of society are the more advanced and the more able to take humanity to the next level, complete with its own twist on suffer the little children to come to me. All right, we've got 2 more clips left, Todd. I'm not going to ask any form of leading question. I just want your reaction to what you have watched so far.
Remember before COVID came along, since we're attaching what's next and checking the boxes of what's similar, I said once you believe in transgenderism, you'll believe in anything. That's what I think.
This testimony and more. This audience and you are only getting a morsel. First of all, only a morsel of this interview. The interview is 2 hours and 41 minutes. You're only getting a morsel of it. And I tried to have clips from across the landscape of the interview rather than just take a few things out of context. But understand, for nearly twice that amount of time, he spoke to the United States Senate behind closed doors about all of this. 4.5 hours that they didn't have on securing the border. 4.5 hours that they didn't have on lowering inflation and cost of living. 4.5 hours they didn't have on bringing the Ukraine war to an end. 4.5 hours that they did not have on fixing just the embarrassment of education system that we have. On and on I could go. But they made sure before Christmas to give 4.5 hours behind closed doors to this.
That's why I almost live on camera right there. I almost got up and gave you a hug so everybody could see it, because you didn't make me watch that entire thing, because this is enough. They're going to try to make you think you're living in some kind of real life Star Trek meets Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Because you've given them evidence that that's what you want to do. And like I've said on any number of fronts, what are you prepared to do? You must live differently than you have in the past. Otherwise, you're going to fall. If not this, you're going to fall for something else.
I think I've actually saved the 2 most important clips, other than the first one, for the very end, which we'll get to after the break. Based on what you have seen thus far, do you think I'm crazy for even suggesting this?
Well, no, because ultimately, I think this is an us problem. They're telling you this is a psychological experiment. You're the rats. You're Pavlov's dog. And again, you've shown enough evidence that
You'll answer the bell.
You are ripe for salivating when that bell is rang.
All right. 2 more clips to go. And they will put this thing in a final context. You have to hear for yourself or watch if you're watching on YouTube or Blaze TV. More in a moment. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show. If you're like, hey, we got the mo. We've been sitting in this sluggish real estate market for the last few years. Let's MAGA the real estate market. You still need an agent you can trust to help you navigate the transition from the Let's Go Brandon real estate market to the MAGA one. All right. And where would you find that kind of an agent? Well, the name says it all. Head over to realestateagentsitrust.com. We'll hook you up with an agent whose track record of success we have verified. Otherwise, we wouldn't recommend them to you. And they're from all over the country, but a lot of times they're also from right here in the same Blaze audience as you. So you have values in common as well. So whether you're trying to get across town or you need to get all the way across the country, ultimately where you need to go is across the finish line with the result you're looking for. Find an agent that can help you get there at realestateagentsitrust.com. Again, that's realestateagentsitrust.com. Once more, realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, so what will be the next global level event? Similar to the scamdemic, by which the spirit of the age will attempt to impact how the entire planet does business, or whether it does business at all, how it worships, or whether it can even attend worship at all, who can even take part in society, or whether society will even be active at all. There's been a lot of speculation about this since it worked so well during COVID. And a lot of the speculation is centered around, well, they're just going to keep doing it with another healthcare scare. I don't believe that. I think you'll see the same game plan, but they're going to call different plays. We're wise to that. Going to make halftime adjustments. I think what we're watching is the best candidate yet for the next global level event. And there's 2 more clips left of this interview that aired on News Nation almost 2 weeks ago from a DOD whistleblower, military veteran, DOD contractor, and how his life has been impacted and changed since he was asked to do crash recovery of a UAP, which is what the term is now for UFOs. There's 2 clips left here. And in these 2 clips, they are going to really hammer home the worldview consequences of all this. Here's clip 6.
You've been really touched, haven't you, by this experience? It's touched you spiritually.
Yes, it has.
There was a gathering at Esalen.
Okay.
And a lot of very high net worth individuals who were interested in suppression of non-human intelligence attended. What happened?
I think something epic happened. I think something happened that, if it was fully documented and understood, would go in the history books.
I had a feeling last week that that was historical.
It felt absolutely historic. What you had was a combination of the world's leading, like most frontier scientists. You had people that were top experts in all their fields. And then you had a variety of fields that was outrageous. We had neurosurgeons, doctors in neurosurgery. We had physicists. We had high net worth individuals in the billions that were extremely open-minded and had a frontier attitude towards all this. We had mystics. We had psychic kids. We had children from Germany that could harness and actually showcase their ability to perform telekinesis, their ability to psychically see things with their mind, and were able to prove that to all of us. We also deployed some of our psionic assets that we've used and are part of our new team with Skywatcher, and we summoned UAP. We had the UAP come and fly around and visit and hang out with us and take off.
And I have to say, I saw it too.
Yeah.
And it was profound. It's a spiritual experience.
You bet it is. So a gathering of elites across multiple sectors. The location mentioned is in California. This event did take place. I looked it up. Now, whether what's described here is what took place at the event, I don't know. But there's that word summoned again. And the leading people and experts across multiple sectors of human society. Last clip.
Do you think the public have the right to know that we are not alone?
Yes, I'll say yes to that.
And the thing I find shocking, though, is that the most beautiful thing that you've described to me, the most exciting thing, is what I think our audience is going to have the biggest trouble with, is believing the idea that human beings have the capacity to do things with their minds that have been suppressed.
Yeah. I just kind of smile because that makes it more entertaining for me, because they're going to be shocked. But you know what? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there's more people that believe it. They're just not talking about it. And I can tell you for a fact, even within our world of hardened operators at the highest level, guys that are still in, behind closed doors, we all know it's true, and we have the most emotional talks, like we're part of Oprah's book club. I mean, it's true. And right now we're in a moment where the truth is being obfuscated and twisted. But the truth, I'll tell you, is our weapon. And when we're willing to accept the truth, no matter how profound or earth-shaking, is when we move into a position of power. And it's going to liberate this subject. And you know what? How fun would it be if we're right? I'm not telling you, it'd be different if the government and what was being hid behind this subject matter was the fact that there was an asteroid on course for Earth, that there was no way we could redirect it, or there's no way we could defend against it, and we were all going to die in the year 2020X or whatever it is. That's not what's being hidden. What's being hidden here is something extremely positive, and it's something we've all hoped for. It's the one thing we've all looked for in all of our religions that we celebrate across the world. It's the one thing that we want to be true of our religion, and it's the one thing that the one common thread amongst all religions. And so that's what's being hidden, and that's what we're going to find out, and you can't bottle it up.
The implications of what you're saying also are that potentially there is some kind of capacity to draw incredible amounts of energy from the quantum vacuum.
I've seen it.
You've seen it?
I've seen it.
There's also obviously the capacity to use propulsion systems that are far beyond what we're describing.
Yeah, that seems to be the case as well.
Anti-gravity.
Anti-gravity.
They know about it. Anti-gravity, zero-point energy. Those secrets are being suppressed from our knowledge.
I've seen demonstrations recently that, again, proves that the government doesn't have a monopoly on this. They have, we know that they have been working on it. They've seemed to have been doing a good job in keeping others from making their own independent progress. But that time is changing. Independent progress is happening right now, and it's coming out. That's why I'm so confident. We don't need to rely on their body of lack of evidence, let's say. We don't need to rely on that. Like, it's here. Like, the shift has already happened. There's people in Silicon Valley and around the world that are so financially independent, so intellectually independent, and yes, so emotionally and psionically independent that they don't need the government.
That is a sample of 4.5 hours of closed-door testimony given in the United States Senate right before Christmas. The host of the interview there, Ross Coulthart, is really kind of the Mike Wallace of Australia. He hosted their 60 Minutes program in Australia for many years. And this has become his signature issue. It's basically, if you follow him on X, it's all he talks about, messages about, evangelizes about all day, every day. So there's a lot I could say, but let's do this, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Let's do the checklist we started off with again. All right? See if I'm just completely off base in suggesting that this is the next global level event. And I won't even throw in, if you believe a certain kind of eschatology and you were looking for an explanation for what happened to all the Christians that got raptured, well, guys, they're just not the people in tune with the new frequency of consciousness, so they had to go. That'd be a hell of a cover story, would it not be? Mm-hmm. That could explain why a rapture level event would occur, that a lot of people would buy into the masses. I mean, they're not one of the left-handed gay men. They're not one of the indigenous cultures. They're not tuned in to the new enlightenment, and they just couldn't handle it. So it was like a Thanos snap, and they were gone. Number one, both narratives have the potential to impact every single household. Box checked?
Impact, yes.
Potential, yeah.
Both narratives create religious-like zeal and conviction. Box check?
For sure.
Yes.
Both narratives can provoke such fear they cause individuals to lose faith in their own self-reliance and or God and turn to government for deliverance.
I think this is more of an outcrop of already losing that faith.
Yeah, it's not unique to that front, but it fits.
Okay. Number four, both narratives provide problems seemingly too large for individuals or local efforts alone to solve, thus requiring unique power and control granted to national and global interests and governments.
No.
You don't think it checks that box?
I think it is going to be far more localized.
Okay. Todd, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, close enough for the purpose of this, yeah.
5. Both narratives have enough scientific undertones they can be used to justify both coercive power and communal influence to enforce and segregate. And the scientific undertones are required in order to present itself as objectively truth-based and therefore to be trusted.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, that's what he's alluding to. And you can see the pattern in this interview. It's a very Darwinian pattern. You start off with this scientific inquiry. What's the origin of species? And you end up with descent of man. That's exactly what happens in this interview. Okay. 6, both narratives have active pre-existing subcultures largely ignored by the masses until the tipping point moment, and thus able to produce an instant yet unvetted class of experts whose reputations are not yet tarnished so they can be instantly trusted, like Newsmax, but Stephen Greer on the air suddenly out of nowhere almost every single day. And this is his philosophy, by the way, what this guy is saying.
Yeah, close enough, yeah.
In other words, the pop culture softened us up on it, so it seems believable that this could happen because we've witnessed enough of this kind of content, right? So it's just somewhere embedded in our subconscious, and then all of a sudden, here's the new expert class to bring it into our full conscious that this is actually the narrative of what's happening, like with plagues and zombie plagues and viruses and outbreaks, right?
Sure.
Okay. Number 7, both narratives entice the recipient to mistake science for magic, to believe the natural world is also the hub of the metaphysical one and not an unseen realm that we are separated from due to sin. How many times do you say the word summoned?
Yep.
And you can now connect with that hub and be considered one of the special people by repeating and doing what the science says. He says this at the end. Well, just in case your governments, let's say we lose an election and people like your Trump win, the science will just come forward and your governments won't be able to stop us from doing this to you. Thoughts? Box checked?
Yeah, close enough, yeah.
So you're 7 for 7, you're 6 for 7?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I rest my case. I'll just turn it over to you guys from here.
Aaron, you want first or last?
I'll go first. You gave me the ins and outs here because you watched the whole thing. So I just skimmed for the cues that you gave me and I'd watched very little else. I went into this thinking I was going to scoff at this. I came out of it believing that everything he said is true about his own personal experience with these so-called non-human intelligence. Everything he said is absolutely true. And there's nothing new under the sun. I think he's communicating with demons and or small g gods. That's not new. I just read the story with my 3-year-old about Saul going to where? The Witch of Endor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's nothing new under the sun here. If you have the Holy Spirit within you, you should not be arrogant towards these entities, but you should not fear them at all. Not at all. But that is what we're talking about here. We're going from, and it's interesting that Todd went there because that's the first place that my mind went to. If you are one of the people, and I've always said this, if you are one of the people who are golf clapping along as the trannies spike the volleyball into an actual girl's face and saying, oh, empowering, or not open, you have the bigger mental illness than the actual person engaging in that demonic deception themselves. You do. If you're doing the golf clap or you're cowed into silence by that obvious rejection of reality, you have the bigger mental illness. So yes, you've already been spiritually one-shotted. Why wouldn't you fall for this? But here's what I see happening in the more immediate future. He talked about this group, and one thing, you watched the whole interview, right, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
Was the church Christianity mentioned in one syllable?
No.
There you go.
Nope.
There's your tell.
Yep.
I would have liked to ask this guy, hey, what?
Except indirectly saying that it's the biblical worldview that's
correct.
That's not in tune to any of this. Without saying it, notice it was exempted, but yes.
Yeah. Hey, did you ever quote, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess? What happened to these entities when you said, no, no, that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, this is a concern of mine now. Because we're past the point of indirect communication with demons, with all of these lies, the chief among them, that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. It's not just a perversion of reality, it's a rejection of reality. We're going to direct communication with demons. And, oh, by the way, summonings. Oh, and by the way, we have these little get-togethers, these retreats where we summon these UAPs.
Billionaires in places like Silicon Valley.
You want to come along? We're going to do that this Friday night.
Yes.
Except it's not just going to be open for anybody. This is not just going to be like going to an amusement park. It's only going to be these people taking these retreats are only going to be preying on the most vulnerable. That's what's going to happen next. You're going to hear about this under the surface. What needs to happen next, though, is that once these become kind of a subculture, and that's, I think, what's going to happen next.
Yep.
Once these become subcultures, priests, pastors, men of God, otherwise, need to infiltrate these and play interference. Absolutely. Because I think that's where this is going next. This is nothing new under the sun. As we become more secularized, I'm sorry, Todd, as we have more bells and whistles, we think we're immune from this stuff. No, it's just the old paganism. I'm sorry, I gave you 60 seconds.
Yeah, this is just transgenderism again. I mean, they say, this is so fun. I can't wait till people find out we were bending spoons with their mind. Why aren't you putting it on this phone so we can all see it? Because that's not the goal. You actually, like with transgenderism in public schools, this is like the teachers union dream writ large. They just want to take your kids away from you. They don't like the family. They simply want to burn it all down and create the world anew in their image. It's going on right now. The playbook has worked before. And the reason the church isn't even brought up because they don't even want to wake it up. They're trying to tap into a real spiritual hunger that they know exists.
Yes.
That over and over and over again, the church, like I've said before, either doesn't want to meet or wants to get in the way of meeting.
Amen to both of you. And I'll just close by noting one more time. What you just heard was testified to at the United States Senate before Christmas for 4.5 hours.